So no, Atomic Habits by James Clear is not the worst self-help book. In fact, it's actually a great classic book, and it will continue to be that way regardless and independent of the 10 entire views that this video is going to get. However, many people have a misunderstanding of habit and its role, not necessarily because of anything he explicitly says in the book, but just because of a misconceived and preconceived notion of what habit is and what habit does. And again, if you haven't read that book in its entirety, then it's worth checking out. Like any book, its value can be overstated, but at the end of the day, it is a good book. Alright gang, so as per usual, this is not going to be a full-length, long-form style guide, but this is rather just going to be a general picture of first the misconception of habit, and I'll actually go into what's good about habit, why habit isn't actually the best thing long-term for a lot of applications, and then finally I'll actually end with what I suggest that you do instead. So if you want to get to the actual actionable advice that I suggest, then go ahead and just bear with me here for a second. But first, who is this not for? So this actually is not a video for someone who just wants to generally become healthier and happier. Likewise, this isn't actually advice for someone looking to generally automate their life and to automate their systems in life, or for a general goal, like keeping the house cleaner, for example. Because actually that's what I think habit is great for, and that's not what the topic of this video is. So this video instead pertains to those of you who have goals that involve some level of mastery or otherwise some level of transcending the boundaries of what comes from just general habitual action. Now don't get me wrong, showing up is important, but when I made the most progress as a violist and as a musician, when it seemed relatively unlikely for me to do so in the way that I did, it was not happening habitually. And that's actually the case more often than you'd think. When people are at a very high level of something, very rarely is the progress and what they're doing actually habitual. It usually comes from a level of self, and it's not actually caused by just a simple act of showing up in and of itself. So without any further ado, let's just get right into it. So here today first, we're going to talk about what habit is actually good for. So like I just said, habit is actually great for things that you want to automate and for things that you want to just generally become consistent, because it's kind of in the name. If you just keep doing something, you get in the habit of doing it, then the action becomes just that, habitual, and that's generally how it's performed. And they're great because they actually don't require a lot of concentrated effort on your part. And in fact, I think your habits are actually extremely useful and extremely important. However, it doesn't do what a lot of people think it's going to do, hence this video. But if you do fall into the aforementioned category, then how do you go about changing your habits? And in that case, I think Atomic Habits actually becomes a great book from start to finish. But to basically just give a general summary of James Clear's book, you want the actions that are unconducive and that you don't want for your end result to be invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. And then you flip those four things for the actions that you do want, and these become your habits and your systems, and these systems should automate over time. This is the cue, craving, response, and reward system that is essentially the backbone of James Clear's book, and it actually works great for what it's intended for. Don't get me wrong, habit can be extremely, extremely powerful. So when we talk about mastery and breaking limits, this is not something that's usually done through habit. And that's because when you want to achieve the highest level of something, or just in general, then you need to have the motivation and the drive to seek to become better at the thing that you're pursuing. Or rather, to become a better version of yourself at whatever it is that you're doing. This is the principle of identity change, and it's actually in Atomic Habits. You need to find a desire to change who you want to be, and then optimize your systems naturally from that point forward. And actually, I think this is what James Clear thinks. I think the idea is just often misinterpreted from the book. So if you want to achieve results that aren't representative of a merely habitual effort, then you need to stop thinking of your work as habitual. Now, at the same time, I'm not suggesting that grit and determination are the primary drivers of success either, because systems are extremely important. However, when you try and create habit without it coming from a genuine place of identity and self, then the effort is often just in vain. And I'll tell you exactly what I suggest and exactly what has worked for me to, in just a few years, go from being basically a beginner musician to being at an elite conservatory now in just a matter of a few years. So the first step is to ask yourself who you want to be and why. And believe me, this step is much harder than it sounds if you actually do it properly. So really stop and think that whatever answer you come up with is essentially what you're going to dedicate your life to. So really take your time and make sure you get this right. Then put yourself in the skin of this person and actually ask how they would think and how they would behave. And then guess what? There's actually no physical boundary stopping you from becoming that person. Now, obviously, you don't want to be just mimicking somebody because this only works if you are yourself. However, who yourself is can change wildly. And by answering that first question, you've actually already created a possible version of yourself. Our identity can and will change, and we can influence this change to take us where we want to go. Then, once you have this person, aim to strengthen it and prove it to yourself over time, beginning with the habits and the systems that actually create the results that you're after, but not doing them habitually. So do not just go through the motions. That can be fine for keeping your house clean, but not for this. Aim to connect every single action you do with your identity, and this will strengthen who you are, long term. Now you can still call this a habit if you want, but it's not being performed habitually. It's done with purpose. And this is what gives you results, not the other definition of habit. So if you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe so that more of my videos get sent to your homepage. And as always, if there's something else that you want to see, go ahead and just let me know in the comments because I read all of them. So take care of your mind, especially when you don't feel like it.